somebody who was a host. Oh, excellent.
Okay, thank you. All right, so welcome to the SSI and Atala PRISM room. I'm very jealous because Benjamin's first name is Cardano. Is that real, Benjamin?
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So basically, in the SSI Atala PRISM room, the Atala PRISM team has decided that every week we will support our community in and after town hall room, and this is so that new members or existing members or people that are going through the Atala PRISM course can actually come to a place and find human beings to ask their questions to. Where I would like this to go is that the community makes sure that there's an SSI room every week so that the community can help the community with stuff related to SSI. But right now we're still at that stage where sometimes the community sets up a meeting and Atala PRISM sets up this meeting and we conflict, and all of those kinds of things happen. So does anybody else want to maybe give Benjamin an overview of SSI? Or should we give him Allison's link to her video?
Yeah,
I can give a novice's description unless someone else wants to step up and give an expert description.
We like the novice description because the expert ones can get very technical.
I agree.
So go for it.
Okay, well, my understanding of SSI, self-sovereign identity, is you control every aspect of the information that's associated with your identity, and you can share it however you deem necessary in regards to whatever institutions you're interacting with. And there are different levels of self-sovereign identity, but there are, one of the proposals I've seen is where you would have a KYC firewall, so somebody could determine that you are a real individual, and then that self-sovereign identity could be issued to you in terms of a digital identity, which then you could monetize, for example, in a program like Profila, which is an advertising platform using zero knowledge advertising. But basically it allows you to have control of your identity as opposed to corporations having control of your identity, and giving you the opportunity to still have an anonymity in those areas that it's necessary or desired. Does that sound like a decent description?
Well done. That is really nice. Does anybody want to add anything to that? No? Happy? Excellent. So thanks, Allison, for sticking the link in the chat. So Benjamin, if you look at the chat, Allison's put a link in for you where she explains in layman's terms what self-sovereign identity is, and then she explains the use case that she's working on in terms of how it will be used.
Thank you so much.
But what we all, the dream world we're all working towards is that no individual organization will try to take all of our data, monetize it, analyze it, and push junk to us like they currently do. And we're also hoping that we can be in control of our own data to the extent where we choose what information we want to share with which organizations. And you will see that experience coming through as you use the demo app with the demo site. Have you found the demo site?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to add one more thing after Bruce was done there. I'm actually working with another friend of mine who's a grants manager to help maybe the grant system, at least in the United States right now, to have like a zero knowledge proof system, so that they're not having to obtain the information of the users for security reasons, so that there's less legal risk on their part, and so that there's less issue on the private parties or institution who's seeking a grant, so their information isn't ever hacked or anything like that in their system. So we're trying to work with that, and I'm doing some work for them, but that seems to be one system that would use something like Atala PRISM. I wasn't sure about the actual room itself here in the town hall, so I appreciate knowing that it's straight up just Atala PRISM, and that's cool. I'm happy to be here, and thank you so much for giving the explanation there. And I'm excited to hear what everybody's got going on.
Fantastic, thank you. You're also welcome to join the Atala PRISM Pioneer Program. I will put my office hours up for you so that you can book some time with me and we can make sure you get access, and that will give you a bit more knowledge about what this is and how it works. Okay,
Is this something that we can, is this office hours link available after this session is over, or do we need to click on it now to make sure we have access to it after the Zoom call is over?
It's a Calendly link that we've set up. So there's a few members in our team that set up Calendly links so that anyone can book time with us. So 30-minute meetings. Yeah, so it will work after the session as well. Just make sure you copy the links before you close Zoom.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And then the other question I was busy answering before we realized we have to hit record. Thanks, Allison. Is can IO create an SSI challenge in Fund 9? Because this used to happen in the past. And I was told this is not possible anymore because the community votes for all challenges, and maybe Daniel is in the house. So maybe Daniel can confirm that for us.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, but there's this giant mammoth category for DAPPs, right? And lots of DID solutions and the things that you guys are working on are well within the same remit itself. So maybe there is not a specific category with the title of DID, but I think there's plenty of opportunities to continue submitting proposals and innovating even for the DID ecosystem. So I'm not too worried.
Thanks, Daniel. So the answer is no, Daniel's not going to push for us to get a SSI specific challenge. But that is correct. Rodolfo, I think you put a comment on Slack or Discord or somewhere indicating which challenges look like, you know, they would be open to SSI challenges. Now, just remember that SSI or DIDs is not the be all and end all of a solution. Normally, your SSI or your identity information is integrated into some bigger solution that you're trying to deliver into the world, right? You're not just going to give someone an identity. You're going to want to do something with this identity. So no matter which fund you look at, you might find SSI related use cases or SSI enabled use cases where you're welcome to use this SSI related functionality in your proposal. So definitely the door for SSI proposals is not closed. So I'm going to look for my office hours. Are there any other questions, burning questions that you'd like answered?
No, Anushka, I just want to follow up on what you said, right? We're building a DAPP with an SSI underlying technologies, and I see Ruslan and Lance here, our two SSI infrastructure partners. And I believe that we fundamentally, the general population just needs to learn a little bit more about what SSI is, right? And decentralized apps, different like end user solutions will get us there faster. So yeah, there's a lot of room for our community to grow.
Can I probe a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's giving you the insights into the fact that the community needs to understand SSI a bit better? And what initiatives or solutions would you propose to close that gap?
Yeah, I think, Anushka, fundamentally, it's probably one of the results from voting itself, right? Looking at the number of votes on the SSI challenge. right? Compared to like DAPPs and others. That would be one signal. But the other is, for example, just the overall adoption of SSI technologies by the end users. It's not huge. I didn't learn about Hyperledger until I spoke with Tony. I didn't learn about Atala PRISM until I learned about Catalyst, right? And looking through the different challenges and joining town halls and listening to the principles of self-sovereign identity and listening to Charles, how we can help people create economic identities and empower individuals to own their own data, their career, and so on, to be able to open new opportunities. It is not a topic that stands on its own, right? Generally, so that's where I'm coming from.
But I
so
think it is. Sorry, I think this is a SSI as well as Web3 is a novel topic. So we're at the beginning of this ecosystem, building tools. So the adoption is really small. So I think we're in the right time to start building on it, but not in the time that everybody's going to adopt it right now. I think we need to wait for a couple of years at least. So that's why people don't vote for that, or don't know, don't understand. And it's hard to compare to maybe to DAPPs or crypto or whatever, DeFi. We can't compare that way.
But Rodolfo, something that I wanted to also add is like DAPPs are like a perfect vehicle for the education for new users, right? And especially just creating, just automatically enrolling users on a decentralized app in an SSI wallet, giving them verified credentials that they can export and go put into their mobile wallet and then use however they want, right? That's a good and easy ramp into the SSI world, instead of just telling them, hey, here's like a, 10 or 5 different steps that you need to take upfront in order to participate in a DAPP with an SSI because of an SSI requirement. That may deter a lot of people. So just make it, keep it simple and stupid, as they say, right?
I agree, of course, I agree.
Can I ask problem? Maybe this is like analogy with exchange and normal crypto. You can download wallet and it is work. You need to understand what is wallet. Or you can register on some exchange which keep you wallet for you, and it's simple. And if we look that I think that there is many users that have no crypto wallets, but they have wallets on exchange. We know that this is less secure. We know that this is the less. It is not in the SSI speaking, because exchange control you. Not this, but maybe we need something like exchange, which will not force users to download wallet.
Yeah, exactly. I think just for general population, right, to ease of use, UX is very important, and then give them the onboarding ramp to the real SSI world, right? Hey, download everything, all your stuff into an SSI wallet. It's like, how I got into crypto. I just went to crypto.com, open a wallet there. They have a custodial wallet, right, managed for me. And then when I came to Cardano and Catalyst, then I have Eternal, Daedalus, and Yoroi wallets, and those are different, right? So I see something similar for SSI wallets. And what the Roots ID team did with the CLI wallet, the closeout, we're super excited about that.
Yeah,
Can
big
I-
celebrations. Thanks, Nin. So what I do want to share is, I started my SSI journey in about 2017, 2018. And the excitement that we felt about the future and what the future was going to look like and the seamless interactions that we're going to create and have was so fascinating that any identity wallet I could get my hands on, I downloaded and I tried to test it. And the first thing it did was it said, scan QR code. And I was like, QR code. And I took any QR code I could and I scanned it and nothing happened. And I was like, what QR code must I scan for this? And so the user experience of it was quite shocking until one of my very close SSI gurus in South Africa, I phoned him and I said, listen, I'm scanning all the QR codes. I don't know what to do. Like, nothing's happening with this app. I think it's broken. And so and the reason I'm telling you the story is because one of the things we realize is that, the fundamental working blocks of creating a credential, issuing a credential, verifying a credential, and revoking a credential, those are very good use cases for blockchain technology, right? So that is the base functionality that Hyperledger, Aries, or Indy at the time had built, those base building blocks. But then they realized, oh my God, but you need tools on top of it. So thanks to Lance and RootsWallet and Proofspace, who are building tools on top of these API calls and saying, right now you can start using it. But then now that we've seen some of the tools, because if you look at Trinsic or if you look at Evenum, those are some of the earlier tools that have been built on Hyperledger and on Sovereign. And then there's also some banks in South Africa that are starting to build these tools. You're like, okay, now I have this tool and it says scan QR code. So this user experience is not great. Or I have this tool and I can't do anything with it. So the other thing we're realizing within our team is that there is a need for UX and design, So in the next version of Atala PRISM, you'll see some of that knowledge coming into the Pioneer program, and us providing some knowledge in terms of how to create better design. So almost like using design thinking concepts to create your designs and your solutions. So you'll see some of that come through. So it is early days. But the other thing we've also learned, or I've heard multiple times, is that we don't want people to talk about SSI as though it's a thing, or blockchain as though it's a thing. We want people to live their lives and carry on doing the things that they need to do, just knowing that there's less friction involved and that the process can still be trusted. Like, they don't need to know that there's a SSI did and DIDCOM and blockchain thing underneath, but they need to know that they can create frictionless services and processes that can be trusted. So I think the other point I'll make before I ask for the next question is, so we also realize that the trust registry and the trust frameworks are also needed, because now I have this tool, I can create a credential, I can issue it. Yes, this tool says scan your face and then only enter it. So I say to my friend, hey, why don't you just look here? And then I sign up as him and I'm like, oh, okay, this thing is easy to break anyway. So there are trust frameworks and governance frameworks and trust registries that we also talk about in the Atala PRISM Pioneer program that's needed to embed trust in the ecosystem that's using the tools that are being created. So that's another bit of content that you'll see in the Atala PRISM Pioneer program, that I didn't pick up in other SSI stuff that I looked at in my earlier days when I was learning about this technology. So those three things will come together, you know, user experience, trust in the ecosystem, and then your SSI functionality. And then I totally agree with what Rodolfo is saying. Oh, sorry, someone. So I totally agree with what Rodolfo is saying in terms of it is early days. So when you come into the Atala PRISM Pioneer Program, we call it Pioneer Program because you are pioneers. You are helping us, you know, chop through the bush and create a path. You are not pioneers because there's a tar road laid out for you to drive on. So we are all discovering together and creating together. So the SSI community globally is at that stage where we're creating together. So you don't see Ebenham competing with Atala PRISM. In fact, we need to kind of co-create what this future is going to be. And those of you that are involved now and are building now are coming in at the right time because you're starting to create the foundations and you have the opportunity to create those foundations and even shape it. But that doesn't mean you have large scale adoption today. However, I do believe that large scale adoption can come if we have the right tools, the right trust frameworks, and the ability to scale quickly. And that's what we co-creating while we still have a pioneer program. And I think once we have, you know, this is the recipe, it's tried, it's trusted, you just have to follow it. It will no longer be called the pioneer program. It will just be called the Atala PRISM program because we would have tarred the road for people. So I think that's also to manage expectations in terms of where we are and how cutting edge we're all working on, you know, we're working on the bleeding edge here. So I hope that you all appreciate that this is where we are and this is how we're co-creating to move forward together. Are there any other questions?
I would be happy to wait and let somebody else go first. Was there somebody else trying to bring a question forward?
No, go Bruce.
Okay, well, I just want to qualify the state or the question in regards to several issues. Governance is the issue that brought me to blockchain. The idea of, you know, decentralized democracies, liquid democracy, something that really is facilitated quite well by blockchain. And obviously, if you're going to have any kind of voting mechanism, there has to be some type of SSI or digital identity, especially if you're going to go with the model of one individual, one vote instead of one ADA, one vote. And at some point, I would like to propose that some of the voting mechanisms within Cardano be not just about the shareholder version of voting, but the actual individual would have an opportunity, and that would require some type of digital identity so that someone didn't just throw up 16 wallets and get 16 votes. And then in terms of, you know, what's going on in some of the community advisor and veteran community advisor circles I've been just recently engaging with, there seems like there is opportunity for gaming the system, and perhaps it was actually some malicious actors in there doing duplicate. And I'm just saying this is unverified. I'm not saying it's a statement of fact, but it seems that there's a potential and that there was some activity flagged, and there might have been someone that was pretending to be multiple people and getting multiple revenue streams for the same amount of work and just slightly changing it at the VCA level. And so I had proposed that we initiate Atala PRISM DIDs within that community as a way of preventing that behavior. And I did so without any knowledge of where we are and if it's actually available. And so it started a discussion. So my question to you is there any form of DIDs through Atala PRISM currently available? And if not, how long is the time frame that you see before we can have even a small scale adoption just within the community advisors and veteran community advisor community.
Okay, go Alice.
I'm jumping off the edge of my seat. Exactly. Thank you, Rodolfo. So Bruce, I'm sorry we didn't connect sooner, because that's exactly what I just received funding to do, which is bring DIDs to the community advisor workflow. So I'm starting with a very small focused pilot project where I'll be working with the community advisor core members to create an onboarding course for new community advisors. And so a new community advisor would do the course. They will be issued a digital verifiable credential to their DID, and then they'll use that in theory to sign into IdeaScale and start writing reviews. So it's a pilot and it's a small step, but I hope that in the very near future, CAs could be, the first CAs could be using their DIDs to receive a credential and sign into IdeaScale. That is the plan.
Awesome, thank you. This is a crucial issue. I think that this element of our community is overlooked and the importance is huge.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I've talked with Anushka and other people about it. I think that using Cardano's PRISM technology in the Catalyst workflow really is a great place to start, because if we're not using it ourselves, then how can we be selling it to other people? And so that's my perspective. Catalyst today, tomorrow the world is my philosophy.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on receiving funding.
Thank you. And actually, I'm being a bit hyperbolic because I'm excited, but I do think one of the things we as a PRISM community need to guard against is not letting the hype and the incredible potential of the technology distract from the reality. Like Anushka was saying, this is bleeding edge. This is very early stages. And so I do think there's a danger within the community of, a lot of people I've talked to who either think that SSI is a magic wand you wave and suddenly all identity issues are solved. And it's not that. I mean, just like you were saying, without a trust registry, which is in some, has to be in some ways centralized, you don't solve some of the problems. SSI is still, I think, a whole lot better than what we have today, but like anything, it's not a magic bullet. And so I think there's some misconceptions there. And I also think that many people didn't realize that the actual state of the technology and the ideas and the visions and some proposals that were funded got way out ahead of what's practically feasible. And so there's some work that needs to be done to match expectations and visions to reality and realistic timeframes.
And are you aware of the Profila proposal?
I'm not. Why I know. Oh, why do I know that name? I'm not. Please tell me. I know the name Profila, but I can't think of why.
Well, they're basically talking about using Atala PRISM to do targeted advertising, where they provide the KYC barrier to onboard people, but then shield the identity of those that register from the advertisers, who then can do targeted advertising, and then the revenues would be split between the individual and the platform, which and apparently they've received funding 6 or 7 times in the past.
I think. Yeah, I think on F6 they received from the Atala PRISM, I think.
Who is
Incomplete.
I don't remember all the names of the teams. I think Michel Van Rooij, if I'm saying his name.
Yeah, Mikhail.
Was the proposer, but they have a very impressive team. And it took me 6 hours to do an assessment because it was a pretty complicated process and proposal. And then I only got a good, so I was disappointed.
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother. I feel you on that one. I've also been a community advisor and not only have gotten goods on reviews that I really thought should have been excellent, but had reviews filtered out that I'm still frustrated by. But that's another, we can discuss those issues in the community advisor group.
Well, fortunately, I only did 4 and they all got, I got 1 excellent and 3 good. So I guess as a first time advisor, that's nothing to sneeze at. So I'm, I had higher expectations, but I'm still quite pleased with the outcome.
Yeah.
That's really good. As long as you got above good, you're doing well as a CA or a
Oh, thanks.
VCA.
No,
Well done.
actually, my total votes, I had 1 more excellent than good across all 4. And then I did have 3 filtered out, and I was pissed off about that because I got 3 excellents in the same, like there was 10 reviews of my assessment, 3 excellent, 4 good, and 3 filtered out. And I just couldn't understand that. And so I kind of started investigating and trying to have communications in the circle to understand the process better.
Yeah, that's exactly my experience. And I mean, I think there's a lot. Is Viktor still here? No, we lost Viktor. He's the not
Yes,
Viktor.
Reg-
No, Viktor. No, Viktor Corsino. I mean, he's the most famous CA, I think. But yeah, the process I think is fantastic, but it has room for improvement.
Yeah, I think that there's just an institutional bias about not being completely blunt as to if projects deserving of funding, and I'm seeing that now, and I don't want to change my behavior. I want to help change the process because I think blunt honesty is really important when you're doing assessments.
I 100% agree with you. I'm really glad you're on that point because it's a good one.
Thank you. I'm honored to be part of this community.
And it doesn't send mixed messages to people. It's like they said it was good, but then I didn't quite get funding. So I think it's really good if we can just have like a clear, this is following, or instead of going, this is good, but not good enough for the following. I don't know. I also like blunt. Bruce, you raised another point in terms of voting, and Ninh said quadratic something. And so I thought, let's give Ninh a chance to explain his quadratic voting to us, just to give some insight to the people in the room in terms of what Ninh and his team are doing.
Thank you, Anushka. So quadratic voting got funded in Fund 8. Thank you so much for all of your support, whoever voted yes and no. The quadratic voting essentially addresses the well effect on voting in Catalyst. We are building it on our own crowdfunding platform. So we're trying to bring Gitcoin natively to Cardano. And it is a completely open source project and product. I'll put the GitHub link in the chat later. And hopefully, Catalyst, if it wants as a product to adopt something like that, maybe for challenges that are meant to benefit the public good, just like climate challenges, or the I believe SSI as an operating system is also a public good, and or the open source, right? The quadratic voting itself, how it works, is not the one ADA1 vote that we currently have, and you can see like examples of some well effect on voting where some proposals are sub 3 CA score, where 3.xx, or they have 2xx, or even some challenges are like 1 CA score, 1 point something. You can look in the results that get funded, right? But they only get funded by a small group of very large ADA holders versus proposals that have 2 or 3 times, sometimes even 4 to 5 times the amount of unique wallets that have voted, that are much larger, smaller in size. So that means more people have voted for the projects. However, they did not get funded because the voters didn't have as much money, right? So I didn't know, this is my first fund. people were telling me, hey, there's a huge whale effect in voting. I thought they're full of it. But seeing that and just knowing like what we're doing is important. So quadratic voting, essentially what it does is it limits the voting power of like large whales or ADA holders, especially if they want to push certain projects forward. And it balances their voting power with the community's voting power, and encourages everyone to vote, regardless of whether they have a little or a lot, because by participation, you're balancing voting power while keeping the whales also engaged. I'm open to questions.
I'm just going to jump in if that's okay. First of all, thank you for doing this work, because I think it's really valuable. And I've seen you in some other Twitter spaces, and I'm grateful that you're making the rounds and, you know, doing the work to make it to make a better community for all of us. And my question is, you know, this is my personal opinion. I'm just curious if you or anyone else share it. I think quadratic voting is definitely a step in the direction, not a silver bullet, as we all say, or. Yeah. But I do think that there are some issues that should be one individual, one vote. And to me, governance issues fall in that category. And I'm just curious if other people think that's a valid opinion or not. And what your personal opinion is as someone who's leading the charge to a better, more equitable system.
I'll let others answer, and then I'll share my personal opinion.
I will speak from my perspective of having been a Catalyst Circle member last fund. So for anyone who's not familiar, the Catalyst Circle is an experiment in governance for the Catalyst process, where community members are elected to sense problems from the community and work together to solve them in one way or another. But it's essentially a governance experiment. And it's been important to the Catalyst Circle election process that it's a one person, one vote system. And that's led to a lot of complexity in the Catalyst Circle member election process is really clunky and cumbersome, because it's really hard to have an election where you have one person, one vote, and it's anonymous, and it's legitimate and verifiable, and do this all in a decentralized way. And so the Catalyst Circle election ends up being one video call where you have to show up in person to vote, and it's voting via Google Forms, and it takes a lot of trusted people to count the votes. But the principle, the reason everybody has gone through all of those hoops is to allow for one person, one vote for just that reason. And I think there's a place for that. I personally understand the idea that the more someone is invested in the system, the more investment they have, the more they might be educated and passionate and involved and dependent on the outcome. And so that's the reason for the shareholder model. And I think I'm in no means an expert. I think quadratic voting is an interesting in-between step with it's neither one person nor vote, nor you get the whole balance of your ADA. But I do get very nervous about what essentially sometimes feels like a property requirement to vote, which is something we've in many places in the world worked really hard to move beyond. So I certainly don't have the answers, but I'm really happy at the number of incredibly smart minds and researchers and academics and people of all different backgrounds that are philosophers that are focused on that question in this community.
Yeah, also implementing a one people, one vote is almost, I think, impossible for the civil attack and all the stuff. So I think there's a technological problem there for scalability, because in the circle is how many people vote is like on the 100. You can manage that, but if it's not scalable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to there's no governance system that's perfect, right? Including
Yeah.
quadratic voting system,
Of
including liquid democracy, including the deliberative, like one person, one vote. There are governance systems that are better for different use cases, right? So for example, for public goods, open source ecosystem where, you know, the votes generally, if you use quadratic voting system, to manage the allocation of common pool of resources, just like, you know, Catalyst funding, or if we have our own matching pools for open source projects to get funding more quickly, don't have to wait for each Catalyst round to get done, right? And can get a matching pool, just like Gitcoin. If you don't know Gitcoin, check it out. They've raised like 59 or 60 million now for the open source ecosystem, right? Or for climate and others that are public good, where, you know, the power of your dollar as well as the number of people that actually care about the project matter. For governance, maybe nation building apps, right? So for me personally, I see different governance systems for each different challenge or funding category, different use cases, different DAOs that utilize this governance system. Fundamentally, we use voting to resolve conflict, right? In a perfect world, no one has to vote, and everyone's happy with all the outcome. But fundamentally, also, we have this pool of resources, and there's a lot of competition and also collaboration for it. So that's why we use, you know, democratic voting to allocate the resources. Can we do quadratic voting with DREPs if people are concerned about, you know, DREPs essentially being mini whales? Yeah, we can. Can we do, you know, can we have both at the same time to see which projects get funded under which governance system? There's a lot of research that needs to be done. Charles, I had a chance to speak with him in Twitter space about just asking him, hey, what do you think about Gitcoin, Charles? And he mentioned, oh, yeah, we've been watching it. It's been having a lot of impact on the open source ecosystem. But there's a research that needs to be done, you know, on quadratic resistance and so on. So if you guys want to hear that, I can post a link in the chat.
I would love to see a link personally, and you know, I'd like to, you know, at some point be involved in discussions if you have a circle that's talking about these issues, because I think a hybrid voting method is a good idea. You know, maybe there's areas where you would have one individual, one vote, and then there's other areas where people have invested a lot of resources, and 1A to 1 vote or a quadratic equivalent might be, you know, a more just method. But Rodolfo, I just wanted to ask you, I mean, if we all have government issued IDs, is it really impossible to have some level of KYC for voting issues, or is
Well,
it just because
KYC,
have that?
Yeah, KYC requires a central system, cell-time company who's doing that, who has to do that, who has to receive the documents, had to validate, compare to a database. So when you put a KYC, you add a centralized part on the system that had to be relied to maybe other stuff, or maybe IOC. Maybe IOC can do somehow this proof of lies, but it's not perfect, and I think that they also have issues with that. So, but I think this KYC works for some use cases. I do think so.
Well, and I'm not a huge fan of having to give up my information, but it was necessary just for onboarding into crypto. And so, you know, if we've, I mean, I don't know if everybody's had to do that. I do maintain access to several exchanges that don't require KYC, but all my onboarding and offboarding or off-ramping have to go through a bank. you know, and so I
Ironically, if you only got your ADA from being funded from Catalyst, you wouldn't have to do any KYC in the sense of showing a national identification.
well, that's a beautiful thing, and I hope to be moving in that direction.
Excellent. I see Kenric has his hand up.
Yes, and I've actually been listening in longer. Something happened with my Zoom where I could hear the conversation, but it wasn't letting me into the room. So I had to log back out and back in. But I wanted to respond to some of the earlier conversation with regard to questions about different kinds of voting. Because I think actually having the digital identity is going to enable that. So you could imagine a couple of different scenarios, right? Some communities might feel strongly that the shareholder representation is what they need for their community. But then they're going to suffer from what Ninh was describing as sort of the whale effect, because their actual voting power increases quadratically. And you don't really even have to have majority control of the coins to control the decisions. On the other hand, so then as Allison was saying, the quadratic voting kind of provides a middle ground where it's intended to kind of provide this balance so that your voting power is still weighted by how many coins you own, but it's intended that that power grows linearly rather than quadratically. And that's a big change, and I think that's important and worth trying to pursue and enable, but it does require identity and ideally use of Atala PRISM and the digital identities. But then you can also, and I don't apologize, I don't know who the individual was, but someone made the comment that some processes like choosing governors in a system might really be preferable to have one person, one vote. And indeed, I think the digital identities and the ability to create different kinds of assets and coins, the combination of those, I think, enables it. Because you could imagine that some communities, you would require the digital identity, and then also either just the identity itself or some kind of coin that you hold as an individual and can't be traded, that's locked to your identity, and that one coin becomes your voting power, and everyone, and that gets distributed evenly to all members of the community. So all members of the community have equal votes. So what I think is that I think there also has to be kind of a respect with regard to the choices that communities make with across this spectrum of ways of doing governance and ways of doing voting. And at the same time, awareness of how that affects the governance of those communities.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better than Dr. Nelson. Super happy to have him on the team to help us actually do the research and the implication of quadratic voting, maybe even combined with the liquid democracy reps. But I also wanted to add, like, one of the weaknesses, Bruce, that you brought up of like governance system where it's one person, one vote, or quadratic, essentially governance system where it moves the power from, how much you have and how much money you have or ADA you have, more towards the number of people who voted, is the ability for people just to create new wallets, right, and put just one ADA and just vote that way. So Sybil attacks. And to counter Sybil attacks, we are proactively working with Roots and Proofspace, and also are looking for other partners that have the SSI operating system that we can integrate into our solution. Because and I realize, like, we are really at the beginning of things, right? Even if someone has a SSI wallet and credential, there's not a lot of more information that they have, but it provides like it provides the funders, the people who vote, a degree of privacy that voters naturally want, right? With zero knowledge proofs and so on. But I'm also not, naive in terms of understanding that we do need some KYC for high risk voters, right? If we detect, okay, this is likely going to be a duplicate or Sybil attack, then we will enforce the KYC. But then just to make Sybil attacks and gaming the system harder, people will still be able to game the system, right? There's no perfect technology. Like in terms of security, if people want to hack you, you will get hacked no matter what. It's just to make it hard for 99.9% of the population to get there. And then to handle the 0.001% manually through real people, right, who handle the risk.
Well, and if I might just jump in and say that when you set up a digital ID system and people are one person, one vote, the number of people would be so great that one individual having 2 or 3 votes would be ineffective, because the larger the voting base, the harder it is to skew it. So that's all I want to say. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but thank you.
Last thing I want to say, when you like get Sybil attacks, that's actually good problems to have, right? That means you have something valuable and people want to game your system. So I just want to bring that up.
The silver lining, Ninh. I see Viktor has his hand up. Viktor, what is your question or comment?
Hi, everyone. I just want to add few things to this one person, one vote, and how the KYC can be performed with the help of SSI. Actually, we may not do the KYC, but if a person, that's something that Kenric already said, but I want to put a few details, that we may rely on the credential that person already received from other services. And this may be kind of measurement of reality of this person, right? So if I already collected a bunch of credentials from different services, and the service I want to onboard trust that services, I may share this credential. They may be completely anonymous, but they will prove that I'm a real person. I already interact with that services. So you may trust these credentials and consider me as a one person. For me to create another wallet or DID with the same amount of credentials could be quite complicated. Plus, some of that credentials can be some of them will require payments from my side. So it makes the Sybil attack quite complex. Well, still possible maybe, but quite complex. Plus, some of that services may do a live check and then issue an anonymous credential that I've passed that live check. So this is how we may definitely solve this issue. But of course, it requires services that are issuing the credentials to be in one like network, or the credential should be issued to the same user wallet or to the same DID. Then the user can share the credentials from different services from this DID. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks for sharing, Viktor. I think there's been a lot of valuable discussion here today, and I thank all of you for participating. I know we only have about 3 minutes left, so I'm not going to go into details and elaborate, but I think there's definitely room for more collaboration amongst the people in the room. So please feel free to reach out to each other and continue the conversation. I know Eric has been asking a few questions in the chat. Eric, would you like to unmute yourself and share any comments, ask any questions that you may have in this last few minutes that we have?
Hi again. Can you hear me? I don't really have a lot of questions. I've been just putting up comments. One of the things that I've been saying here is that, if you want to have true voting, you have to create true identity. And I have been working with different kind of groups within biometrics, for instance, and stuff like that. So one thing that we've been looking into is using biometrics like eye scan, fingerprints, blood types, and DNA. And anytime you use that, you can also machine code that. We're already using, for instance, fingerprints when you walk into doors and stuff like that for that. And the thought that we have in this think tank is that you take some or maybe all of these, and you machine code all of that. And once you have machine coded that, you can actually NFT that into an identity. Once it's an NFT and the NFT is minted, you have a form of identity. Once you have the identity, now you can, start doing the privacy parts of, who am I, doctors, SSID, so on and so forth. The way we have been thinking is that you have to start with creating an identity that is true to who you are. And using your biometrics is a very good way that could work. Specifically, that we are already using a lot of the biometrics today. I've talked to a couple of guys that are using, actually there's a wallet on the new phones or watches or whatever you want to call them. And you put the watch on and you have your wallet on the watch, the new watches, and it will actually take a sample of your sweat and create the DNA out of the sweat that opens up the wallet on your watch. So there are a lot of things that's happening in the future. I do want to just say one more thing. And again, we all know DNA is very personal and eye scan and all that kind of stuff, so I'm not going to go into details. I do want to just say one thing that I totally agree with Anusha, is that we are the beginning. We are just scratching the surface. And so, yeah, we're moving forward with that. I mentioned earlier that I'm working on a program where we're doing a city voting, and it's not really a voting, it's more that the city, the people that live in the community, they will have an app where they can go in. Let's say that the city goes in and says, hey, we want to build a new road. What do you guys think? Or we're going to add a tax to build this new road. And people will then open up the app and say yes or no. And it's more a guidance to the elected officials in that city. And then the people that have the app and votes, they get paid with a form of a city token. So these are just things that we're working on. But again, I'm not like Bruce, I don't want to take up too much of your time. So thank you.
Can I just say one quick thought, Eric, that what you said prompted me to think about, because we've talked a little bit in past meetings about differences between NFTs and SSI and verifiable credentials. One thing that I didn't really follow exactly the details of what you were saying, but one thing I get cautious about when people talk about biometrics and NFTs is the danger in putting anybody's personal biometric data onto the blockchain, because I think that represents a huge privacy risk, no matter how much that data might be encrypted or hidden, because the whole point of a blockchain is it's public and immutable if it's a public blockchain. And so we don't only have to be concerned with encryption for today, but for the indefinite, infinite future.
That is true. And I just want to fill this in. There are actually some of the blockchains. There are Monero, for instance, that is not an open blockchain per se, and there are other there are other entities out there that are working on blockchains that are not totally open like the other ones do. The thing here is when it comes to identity, and you and I know that, anybody can find out who you are. So, I mean, the thing with an identity for people is that how do you create an identity for someone living on the desert in Africa?
Yeah,
You
and so
have to use some form of it. And yes, and I don't disagree with you. And I know that we're running out of time, and this is a discussion that can go on for a very long time. And I absolutely agree with you about identities can be manipulated or used. There are ways to protect identities, and today nobody can protect their own identity today.
well, right, but the difference with SSI, and I think Anushka's just alluding to it, is that the idea isn't that you put anybody's personal data or biometric data onto the blockchain, that all of that data is stored locally. And the only thing that goes on to the blockchain is the hash of a credential, if that credential needs to be publicly verifiable. So
but that's the point. That's why you have private keys and public keys. That's
right,
exactly
but
what you're talking about.
right, except that the personal data, the biometric data, for example, would never be stored on the blockchain. It's stored locally.
I'm not following you 100%, but yeah, that's very possible.
But
I mean, I'm not. I don't want to get into the details of everything because I'm not an expert myself.
Eric, your sound keeps coming and going. I don't know if it's only for me or for everyone, but I think you've given us lots of food for thought in those last few minutes, and definitely raised a topic that I'll add to our list in terms of NFTs versus self-sovereign identity, the similarities and the differences. And I think it will make for a really good conversation, because I've heard of a few proposals that are using NFTs in a way similar to us talking about using SSI. And every time I hear that, I wonder how good or bad is this? So I think we'll have to dig into that one in one of our discussions. Maybe not the 1st of June, maybe the next one, because for the 1st of June, someone's put up their hand to say they'd like to do some stuff and present some things and get the community's input. So we're looking forward to that conversation on the 1st of June. But I do thank everyone for joining. Thank you so much for making time to continue the conversation, taking SSI forward, being part of the community. And please, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to the community. We're all here to help move SSI forward. Something I really believe we're going to make real this year.
Excellent.
All the best. Thank you so much. Rodolfo, you can stop the recording and then help me understand.